Good morning, members. Welcome. Apparently our last minute advertising is working well. We did a rehearsal 2 days ago and we had 150 members registered and now we have over 600. So either that or this topic is really exciting. So I think it's a bit of both. So on behalf of the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our City of Vancouver 2022 Municipal Update. My name is Taylor Bigger and I'm your past board chair as of about a month ago. I'm also a realtor of 19 years with Oakland Realty. So before we begin, I just want to go over the format for the session. We're going to have presentations from our two panelists as well as some supporting staff from City, followed by a Q&A session close to the end of the event. We also have a Q&A in between the two presentations as well. So when this session opens, you can type your questions in the Q&A section found in the panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can, but our time is limited today to hard cutoff at 11:30. We are also recording today's session. So in the coming days, we'll send you a link to the recording along with a copy of the presentations as well. So you'll have the slides. So let's get started. We don't have a lot of time. We're pleased to welcome Andrew Pask. Andrew Pask is a senior planner on the Vancouver Plan. He has worked on a variety of neighborhood and citywide planning projects, including the Greenest City Action Plan, the Grandview Woodland Community Plan, the Joyce Collingwood Station Precinct Plan, and Metro Core 2050 Plan. Andrew is also a founder and director of the Vancouver Public Space Network and serves as an adjunct professor at the UBC's School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture. After Andrew, we have John Grottenberg. John is a lead planner for the Broadway Plan in the Special Projects Office at the City of Vancouver. He has worked on a variety of projects, including the first downtown protected bike lanes project, the Transportation 2040 project, the West End Plan, the creation of the Jim Diva Plaza in Vancouver's Davie Village, and currently the Broadway Plan. So welcome to John as well. They're both on screen. I also want to do a quick intro of the other city staff that are supporting them today, and if there's any questions that they may be experts on. We have Catherine Neal. No need to turn your screen on, Catherine, but thank you. Edna Cho, Donnie Wong, Matt Bork, Karis Hebert, and Suzanne Rula. Okay, I'll pass it over to you, Andrew, and we'll get you going.
Thank you very much, Taylor, and good morning. Welcome, everyone. Delighted to be here, and on behalf of my colleagues at the City of Vancouver, it's a real honor to be able to present to the Real Estate Board. So thank you so much for joining the call this morning. I'm just going to do a quick screen share and we'll get going. We have a couple of presentations to share with you. I'll just forewarn you in advance. There's a bit of heft with these presentations. There's a lot of material to share. So we're going to get going and hopefully leave lots of time for Q&A at the end and in between. So I hope everyone can see the slideshow. It should be on your screen now. And with that, let's get started. Okay, I'd like to begin, if I could, before we get into any of the planning content today, by taking a moment to acknowledge our presence on the unceded Coast Salish territory, the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Recognizing the lives, cultures, languages, and peoples of this land, the Vancouver Plan seeks to build on our commitment as a city of reconciliation. We've worked together with the nations in developing the plan. There's further work to come. And we hope through this process to strengthen reciprocal relationships with each of the three nations to ensure that we move forward together. So just very quickly, by way of agenda for the presentation itself, I'm going to be going through the draft Vancouver Plan, trying to touch on some of the highlights of the plan itself. It's a fairly lengthy document. Some of you may already have had a chance to take a look at it. And then as needed in response to questions, we do have some supplemental material on particular policies that we can dig into at the various Q&A points. We are at an exciting moment in planning Vancouver together. We have in early April of this year released a draft plan. This is the result of 2 years worth of work on the planning process. We recently wrapped up 3.5 weeks of public engagement on the draft plan in an attempt to gather material to inform council's decisions on the planning process. We're still taking care of a few meetings such as this, sharing word of the plan and getting the details of the planning document out there. But we think foundationally that this really marks a turning point for the city. The plan proposes a new way for the city to grow, spreading more housing options across all neighborhoods instead of concentrating them in just a few areas or along major streets. And through adding more housing options in all neighborhoods, we think this is really a way to move the city forward, helping our neighborhoods and our city as a whole to become far more equitable and affordable. Over the next 30 years, the plan intends to really set a course for helping us to be a more livable, affordable, and sustainable city with a strong economy where people and nature thrive. But why a plan for Vancouver, and why now? Many of you are probably aware that there are a number of activities taking place regionally, and that helped to set some of the context for the plan. Both Metro Vancouver and TransLink have been updating their long-range plans, and the Vancouver Plan presents an opportunity to really align our work as a municipality with that of our regional partners. We also, I think, have other contextual features to really reflect on as well. Over the past 2+ years, we've all been dealing with the challenges of COVID. And of course, many of us have been dealing with them in different ways. And we know that COVID, as challenging as it has been, has also imparted some lessons about city building. The importance of having daily and weekly needs close by, the critical role that public space plays in cities, and so on. And so the plan presents an opportunity to take these lessons as well and to build them into our perspective and aspirations for the future. Of course, the city has also been doing an array of other work over the past few years. And many of you are familiar with the particular policies and area plans that have been developed during this period. The Vancouver Plan really serves as an umbrella for many of these, and it gives us a chance to advance these bold plans, whether they concern the climate crisis or affordability, and to help them to land on the ground through more focused land use directions. And lastly, to come back to the question of our role in the region, it's really important to think about just the significant place that Vancouver plays as a city in the broader context of 24 odd municipalities across the lower mainland. You can see that Vancouver has about 25% of the population, over a third of the jobs, 30% of the housing units. So its role is significant in this regional context. And the plan again aims to hold that important role, to advance directions that will support the city's role as a center point in the region. Of course, thinking about the future, it's important to start by celebrating the things that are important about Vancouver. Our city is blessed with many strengths. The intent of the plan is to really build on these strengths into the future. And over the course of the last 2 years, we've had a lot of opportunities to talk with Vancouverites about what's important to them, what they love about their city, the sort of highlights that they see. And, I think this list is probably a snapshot of the things that you're all very familiar with. And hear about in your own conversations, the role of the natural environment, the open spaces, the parks, the plazas, the diverse and unique neighborhoods that characterize the city, that create that mosaic of Vancouver, the local shops and community spaces, and so on. And of course, at the heart of all of these things, the people, the residents and community members in this city. So many things to really hold and to cherish. As part of the work that we're doing. And at the same time, of course, we have some fairly critical challenges that we are dealing with. Again, a list that will be very familiar, I think, to people on the call. The challenges of housing, affordability, and homelessness. Affordability sort of broadly beyond that. The impact of climate change and the climate crisis. The fact that in many neighborhoods in our city, it's very difficult for folks to even get a loaf of bread or a jug of milk without jumping in a car if you happen to have one, or a very long walk. So the completeness of neighborhoods has been a challenge. And of course, there are many other factors as well: the availability of critical social services, childcare, challenges around loneliness, toxic drugs, and of course, the legacy of colonialism and the past harms that need to be addressed, including towards First Nations. So all of these factors help to provide some very, very broad context for the plan. And just by way of recap, some of you may be familiar with the trajectory that we've been on, but the plan was started in fall 2019. It was one of the first acts of the then recently elected council. And over the past 2.5 years, we've undertaken a number of activities through several phases of work to try and shape and build the plan. We started quite broadly in phase one, casting the net very, very wide, asking people about the strengths, the issues, their hopes and fears for the future. We used that material to really develop a series of provisional goals to test with the plan in our second phase. That's where we brought out some early directions and looked at ideas like complete neighborhoods in more detail, investigated housing issues in more details, building out the community engagement that we had done with more technical work and research to support emerging directions. In phase three, most recently, we came out with a series of policy and land use ideas. I'll just share a little bit on that because that was something that we were working on last fall. This gave us a chance to really test what we were calling 3 big ideas, 3 foundational principles, 3 key areas of change. I will get into these in a little bit more detail, but essentially what we found through this process was that there was a lot of support for introducing more housing choice across all neighborhoods, a lot of support for the idea, in fact, of complete neighborhoods, more shops, more services everywhere in more distributed fashion, more job space and protections for the critical job spaces that we have, and a lot of interest, a lot of support for actions that would move the dial on the climate crisis, providing solutions to some of those very existential issues that we are facing right now, both in the city and of course globally. We also had a chance during this phase to really talk to people about how they thought growth should take place. Should it be very concentrated, focused in a limited number of areas, or should it be more spread out, more distributed? And we found through our conversations with the community that there was a lot of interest in distributed growth. The idea of seeing the options for housing or other types of growth spread out across the city. So that all brings us to where we are now. As I mentioned, we released a draft plan. This is really an effort to take all of the different pieces that we gathered and gleaned over the last 2 years and assemble them into a draft policy document, a draft land use strategy that we've been sharing to really roll up a lot of the sentiments and the aspirations for the future. So what is the Vancouver Plan? I'll just give you a little bit of a nutshell, and then we'll get into some of the chapter areas in a bit more detail. So first thing to note is that this is a very high level plan. If you've seen it, you probably appreciated the fact that it really tries to set out a very long range set of strategies for growth and change in the city. It does this by using the tool of a land use strategy, identifying areas where growth may take place, the sort of relative degrees of intensity around that. It delivers a series of supportive policies, again, citywide, again, very high level in nature. And it does this as well by setting out through its implementation work, a series of directions for the next steps, the steps that will help us to scale the plan down and ground them through a series of area plans and other implementation activities. So with this in mind, it's also important to note what it's not. The plan is not in itself a rezoning document. It is not the sort of thing that you're going to be able to take to the inquiry center and initiate a development application with. That is coming. This is, again, a high-level set of initial policy directions that will then be scaled down to these implementation tools. The plan does not provide, in that sense, specific guidance on a person's home or business, and it does not supersede other important and related policy initiatives that are currently and concurrently underway as well. So all of that to say, there is more to come. The Vancouver Plan really sets out a framework for future area planning and other activities and citywide implementation work as well. So with some very broad context under our belt now, if you were to pick up the plan and flip open the first few pages and come to the table of contents, this is the sort of thing that you'd see inside. Some introductory sections that really help to frame the context, such as I've done now, set out the plan foundations, the big ideas and land use strategy, and then get into a series of policy areas, which you can see touching on everything from housing to economy to climate, transportation, and so on. And we'll go into some of these in a little bit more detail here. At the beginning, though, in the very first few pages of the plan, what you'll see is a vision statement. And this was really us attempting to roll up in as succinct a form as possible all of the various sentiments and aspirations that had been built into the plan and had emerged over the have emerged over the last couple of years. And it's a vision statement that calls on Vancouver over the next few decades to become a city that lives in greater balance with our ecological systems, while providing more complete, inclusive, and resilient neighborhoods where people of all ages, incomes, abilities, and backgrounds thrive. I mentioned at the heart of the plan are some foundational principles, and just to identify these more clearly for you, there's 3 of them. Reconciliation as a foundational principle is really a call on the city to continue to form relationships and mutual respect with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations and urban Indigenous communities and partners, and to integrate these values into our planning work. The equity principle is a similar call that we will advance as a municipality an equitable approach to planning, with particular attention to equity denied groups that have often been left out of previous planning processes and that need to be centered as part of our work moving forward. And lastly, resilience. And this is a call for us to proactively plan for an uncertain future in the face of all sorts of shocks and stressors. We've already just been through the pandemic, or still in the midst of it, in fact, but there's also other things like climate change, like stresses like affordability and inequity. So these foundations are in turn supported by a series of big ideas, which I'll also unpack here for you as well. These 3 big ideas really touch on key areas of the plan, and going through them one by one. We start with equitable housing in complete neighborhoods, and this is really an effort, a call to deliver more housing options across the city, including new rental and social housing in all neighborhoods. It means creating opportunities for higher density living off of major arterials for improved livability. And it means creating opportunities for everyone to choose a livable neighborhood that best meets their needs. The complete neighborhoods part of this first big idea means focusing on what we love about our neighborhoods, like the local businesses, the arts and culture spaces, the valued amenities, the community centers, and so on, the public spaces. Ensuring that these are equitably distributed. These critical places where we can connect, learn, and grow together need to be equitably distributed across the city. We need to strengthen the assets we have. We need to add new assets in other areas. It means foundationally moving closer towards our climate target of having 90% of people living within an easy walk or roll of their daily needs. So just to go a little bit further still on this first big idea, we recognize that different parts of the city are going to respond to this, that are going to embody this first big idea in different sorts of ways. So when we ask how this sort of big idea lands on the ground, really important to think about the need to be strategic about what we do and where we do it. And we see this really as a sort of strategy that will map out in a variety of different ways. So if you look in the Vancouver Plan, you'll see different neighborhood types attempting to embody this idea of complete neighborhoods and equitable housing. We have 3 key areas which I'll call out in our presentation today: rapid transit areas. These are the areas within a 10-minute walk or roll of rapid transit. The neighborhood shopping areas that we have, the sort of heart and soul of our diverse neighborhoods, and our low-density residential areas, which we are calling in the plan our multiplex areas, which currently comprise most of the land base in the city. Just to go through these in a little bit more detail here as well. Our rapid transit areas, as we know, come in different shapes and sizes. These are areas that many of which have a recent plan, others don't. Some are underway, of course, with Broadway, which we'll hear about in a few moments. But these offer an immense opportunity to add much needed housing, retail, shops, and jobs. And it's important to say that the transit areas as a whole come in many different shapes and sizes as well. We know that we have, at one end of the spectrum, ones that will build out like Oak Ridge Municipal Town Center. We also have smaller scale ones like King Edward. So even within this type, there's going to be variation and variety, but the emphasis foundationally is going to be on seeing these rapid transit areas as spaces for higher density development, including the affordable housing, jobs, shops and services and amenities. The neighborhood shopping areas, as I mentioned, these are the heart and soul of our neighborhoods, really a place of vibrant and diverse activity. They also vary in scale and character. We have some small shopping areas. We have some quite expansive and rich high streets. These are areas that will also see opportunities for new housing choice, for more active, successful shopping streets, really a chance to try and build into the equation a better and more virtuous cycle between the housing that supports the shops and the shops that support the housing and residents with their daily needs. And last but not least, the multiplex areas. These are the low density residential areas. As I mentioned, they comprise a fairly significant proportion of our city, about 50% of it, in fact. And introducing more housing options in these neighborhoods will help to reinvigorate these parts of the city. And we know over the past few decades, these areas have already evolved from being purely single family to areas that have areas that have laneway houses, basement suites, and so on. They're going to continue to evolve through this plan as we introduce different housing options, multiplex and other missing middle forms. So that was a rather lengthy unpacking of the first big idea, just to move on through the second and third big idea and to give you a bit of detail on these. The second big idea is an economy that works for all. This means protecting and expanding areas for business and employment while continuing to focus major office in our business districts. So it means adding more job space to neighborhoods, restaurants, home-based businesses, maker spaces, and so on, so that we can both support people's livelihoods, but also get people closer to the goods and services that they need. And critically, at the same time, important to note that when we talk about job space, 50% of the city's jobs are located on about 10% of the city's land. These are lands that include the port, the South Vancouver industrial area, the areas in the Northeast, lands that are used for production, distribution, and repair. Lands, I would underscore, that are geographically constrained. They have critical infrastructure ties like rail and highway access, and the importance really cannot be underscored enough. We've seen, even through COVID-19, most recently, the global supply chain disruptions that have taken place. This really brings home to us the need to ensure that we have space for local production. These are valuable, scarce, and vulnerable lands in our city, and they are critical. They're the first things that people point to and say, oh, we should just load these up with residential as well. We are sending a very strong signal through the Vancouver Plan that these lands will be remaining for economic and industrial uses. We need to protect what we have. We need to intensify and expand these areas and enhance the employment areas, but they will foundationally be employment areas. So the third big idea that I will just touch on now is focused on the idea of climate protection and restored ecosystems. And this means creating people-first streets that are safe and attractive. It means making space for people to walk, to gather, to bike, and for nature to thrive. It means supporting construction and building methods that reduce energy consumption as we move towards a zero carbon city. It means supporting these through urban design, green space, and infrastructure practices that respond to climate change and increase our resilience. And we know that the current climate crisis is having a real and worsening impact on our city through air pollution, deadly heat waves, and destructive flooding. So the intent of the plan is to really support our response to the climate crisis through more complete neighborhoods, through strong connections between housing, jobs, and transit, ensuring that we are reducing our emissions wherever we can, and again, working towards a city that is zero emission, low carbon, and healthy. Lastly, to note, within this discussion of restored ecosystems, this means really holding space for the restoration of our natural systems, our waterfronts, our waterways. It means supporting Indigenous practices, stewardship, and learning. It means planting more trees, focusing on areas of the city with limited tree coverage, looking to areas that we can restore our original pre-colonial landscape. Currently, there is very little room dedicated to ecosystems and nature in the city, and we're at a critical point to correct this, to rethink our relationship between city building and the ecological systems that support us. So those were the three big ideas. I would say there's lots more on them in the plan itself, but maybe one thing to show you now is how these layer up in the land use directions themselves. the land use vision for the Vancouver Plan is really the layering together of these big ideas. And so what you see over the next few slides is how these integrate. The first slide that we've got here is really one that characterizes the different neighborhood areas of the plan and sort of focuses mostly on the first big idea around equitable housing in complete neighborhoods. You can see different neighborhood types moving from the most intensive, the darker purple, the most intensive land uses to the least. So the dark purple shows the metro core, shows the Oak Ridge Municipal Town Center, areas that are going to continue to accommodate a significant amount of housing and job space. And again, just to underscore this, because the question has come up in some of our engagement already, this does not mean that everything in the dark purple is going to look exactly the same. This is not a call for a unified building type. It is a call for differential levels of intensity within the whole land use program. So we've got the Metro Core and Municipal Town Center in dark purple, then moving down through the transit areas, the neighborhood centers, the villages, which is a term we're using for the smaller neighborhood centers, the smaller commercial areas, to the multiplex areas there. And so what we have with these combined together like this is a strong distribution of complete neighborhoods of different scales across the city, ensuring more equitable growth and change throughout. So on top of that, we layer in big idea number 2, and we can see how transit and the critical employment areas build on the neighborhoods layer and continue to shape the land use vision for the city. And last but not least, big idea number 3, and we see the integration of our long-term ecological vision into the urban landscape. This is a very long-term 100-year vision, but collectively it brings us the reintegration of more nature into the city of Vancouver landscape. And collectively weaving these together, we see a future land use vision for Vancouver, a path towards a more equitable, livable, inclusive, and sustainable future for all. I should say, of course, and you're probably well aware of this, that developing a plan like this and implementing it really involves a lot of trade-offs, a lot of big decisions. There's been many that have been part of the conversation so far, part of our public engagement events, part of our technical work, and there's going to be more to come there. Setting priorities and balancing trade-offs. Really, at heart, we know we can't do everything we want everywhere. We know we need to prioritize. We need to be able to be intentional about the future we want. We need to reconcile the fact that there are many tensions that will remain inherent in this process. If we want thriving shopping areas, of course, we need to make sure that there's housing around these areas to really support the shopping, and vice versa. If we are serious about moving the dial on affordability, we need to be content with the taller, denser buildings that are going to help to deliver that new affordable housing as part of this. These, of course, are things that raise concerns in some sectors, but they are the things that we are going to need to wrestle with there. If we want to be serious about an ecological future, we need to hold space for nature, and so on. These are the tensions that will help characterize our work ahead. And that brings me to the last few slides here, our implementation and next steps. Just note that we are now wrapping up our work, sharing the draft plan. We will be proceeding to council, but one other thing to note in the plan itself is that it contains a section on implementation. As I mentioned, it is not possible to do everything everywhere at once, and so the plan really sets out a series of directions in that section to help set out a plan for phasing how growth and change will occur over time. Will enable us to be strategic about how and where we grow, but really is a mechanism to help us with some initial priority setting work, to help us with the task of setting realistic expectations, to really enable partnerships to take place, because what we're showing here is not the sort of thing the city can do all by itself. There are different levels of government that need to be involved, different community partnerships, different stakeholder relationships that need to be nurtured and encouraged as part of implementing the plan. And of course, it's also about coordinating both the land use planning side of things with a lot of other activities that are taking place in the city as well. Our infrastructure planning, our amenities planning, our capital and operational budgeting exercises as well. So the plan sets out in an implementation phase or a section directions on these next steps. And that, of course, brings us to where we are right now, wrapping up this engagement phase, wrapping up these sections of the plan and presenting to council in June of this year, the draft plan, along with the feedback that we've got from this phase of the engagement, really delivering this to council for their deliberation and decision in June. And of course, fingers crossed, we hope a vote of confidence that will allow us to move forward fairly quickly into an implementation phase beginning in June and moving forward over the next couple of years with some longer term implementation activities, some quick starts along the way, some early actions, and some work that's going to be more involved. And with that, I'll just note that our engagement is pretty much wrapped up, but if you do want to have a look at the materials that we've got, they are all available at vancouverplan.ca. You can find the materials that we've got there. We are concurrently doing polling and other sorts of engagement activities. And as I said, that will all be part of what we report to council in June of this year. And with that, I thank you for your time. I realize this has been a long presentation. Appreciate your attention, and I will stop and turn things back to Taylor.
Thanks, Andrew. I don't think it was long, it was the right amount of time. Thanks for that. We have some questions coming in, so we probably only have time for, we have like 5 minutes for a question between your presentation and John's, and I'll just jump right into them. We have several in the group chat here. I'm going to sort of pick the probably most pertinent ones. From Reza. Reza actually, he put in a question in the beginning. With respect to development, previous OCP or NCP has priority or a new plan? For example, can Shaughnessy be redeveloped or not? Is there that's a great question. And I should have said, Taylor, I think what I'd like to do, because I've been talking so much, I've got some of my colleagues here with the departments. I'm going to traffic manage a little bit and invite some of them to take the floor with this. So with respect to Shaughnessy, but I think that the broader question of area planning in the future and how that builds into this sort of implementation work, I might ask my colleague Donnie Wong, who's on the call, just to field that, because he's been working on that implementation strategy.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, and Andrew, thanks for signaling the implementation phase. And I just wanted to say that sequencing growth and change in the city is really quite very complicated. Over the last few years, the city has been really struggling to balance the needs of existing residents and new development and new residents. You can probably tell by the number of rezoning conditions we've been needing to put in place for new developments. Our utility systems are kind of at capacity, and we do expect that any kind of major changes in use and intensification will trigger like a significant investment in utilities and servicing and other amenities. So we wanted to really take a thoughtful, careful approach to this, and that's why we're signaling that phasing of growth and change would be considered as part of implementation. So that would start essentially right away. We'd be looking at all the different areas of growth and change in the city, evaluating those to ensure that it aligns with kind of infrastructure capacity as well as financial capacity and economic viability. So like a lot of we have built the Vancouver Plan and respected kind of the recently approved community plans. And so we'd be considering that as well. So so that the sequencing of change will be part of is upcoming. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Donnie. I have a question here. 41st is shown as a major corridor on your plan, and what's the long-term transit mode for that corridor?
Yeah, and I can answer this one as the engineering lead. We've been working really closely with TransLink. They haven't decided on kind of the technology, whether it's going to be bus rapid transit or grade separated, and that's work to come. It's I would say that that's probably further out on the time horizon in terms of TransLink's plan. However, that could change depending on demand, but the technology hasn't been decided yet.
Okay. Since we only have a couple more minutes before we head to John's presentation, I have a really good one from Derek Drew, but I'm going to hold off on that one because I think it's a longer one. But Blair Smith is asking, is daylighting streams and waterways likely?
Oh, that's a good question, and I'll answer it from the engineering perspective. It is not likely. Like, so I think that most of in fact, almost all of Vancouver streams were buried when the city was built out, and buried and quite deep and put into pipes. So in order to those are our de facto sewer trunks now. So the rainwater has been mixed with sewage, so it's really difficult to do that. However, we do have the ability to manage rainwater, where it lands, and reflect the kind of the topology of the city. So we would be looking at opportunities of installing green infrastructure on specific corridors to really use the shape and lay of the land, and increase our green space, and as well manage our water and increase the quality of our receiving waters around the city.
Donnie, maybe I could just add that there have been a few I mean, what Donnie says is essentially the case, but there have been a few interesting examples where we have been able, through particular green spaces, to do some of that work. It's fairly limited, but there have been some pretty notable projects as well. Tatlow, and of course we're working with Still Creek, which was not buried, but trying to ensure that is part of our natural systems and vital and serving an ecological function as well as a public space function as well.
That's great. I'm actually going to move on to John's presentation. So 1 second, I'm just going to close my question. We're going to come back to those great questions actually at the end of this. We'll hopefully have enough time. And next we have John Grottenberg. Over to you, John.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. I'll just get the presentation loaded here. So thanks very much for hosting us today. I'm very pleased to provide an update on the Broadway Plan. Similar to the Vancouver Plan, this work's been underway for over 3 years now, and we're rapidly approaching the final plan phase, where we will be bringing the plan forward to our city's council for consideration on May 18th. So I'm going to provide essentially a bit of an overview of the planning process to date, the key plan directions specifically focused around land use, housing, jobs and economy, and transportation, but also recognizing that as a comprehensive plan, this covers a whole array of topics, and I would encourage folks to read more on our webpage, and I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. So as I said, a brief introduction and overview. I'll walk through the general land use directions and some select topic-specific policies, a bit of an overview on our public benefit strategy for the plan area, and then I'll wrap up with next steps. Broadway Plan is a major planning initiative focusing on opportunities to integrate development with transit along and around the Broadway subway. It will provide a comprehensive framework to guide growth and positive change over the next 30 years. The plan area is centered on Broadway, generally from Clark Drive in the east to Vine Street in the west, between 1st and 16th Avenues, really running through 3 of our neighborhoods in Vancouver, east to west, Mount Pleasant, Fairview, and a portion of Kitts. So it's a very large, varied, and complex area covering almost 500 blocks, and encompasses many of the city's planning challenges and opportunities, many of which Andrew mentioned in his presentation. The Broadway subway, the catalyst for this area planning work, will be an approximately 6-kilometer extension of the Millennium Line Skytrain with 6 new stations. Construction is now well underway, as you can see from the picture here, and the new line is scheduled to open by the end of 2025. The Broadway planning process was launched in March of 2019 and followed 4 phases, each with key deliverables. Phase 1, or launch phase, concluded in October of 2019 with Council's adoption of a set of guiding principles. Phase 2, building on the guiding principles, was to create the plan's emerging directions, which were published in February of 2021. These highlighted general areas for growth and change and provided policy directions for each of the plan's area-wide topics. The third phase, refined directions, published last November, included more specific policy directions on land use and built form, building heights and uses, etc., as well as more detail on area-wide topics. And finally, now we're just wrapping up our draft plan phase, which amalgamated the results of the 3 previous phases and detailed out the other sections of the plan, as well as including built form guidelines and a draft public benefits strategy. The planning process has included an extensive program of public and stakeholder engagement, and you can see here just a snapshot of some of our key metrics. This engagement was designed to ensure that we heard from the widest range of possible voices, including groups that are often underrepresented, such as young people, students, renters, families with children, and those on low incomes. A variety of in-person and especially since COVID, online or virtual engagement activities were undertaken. And these included 5 extensive surveys, 14 in-person open houses, and 41 workshops, and over 28,000 engagement touch points in total through the last 3 years. The Broadway opportunity. So really underpinning all of our work is the recognition that the construction of the new Broadway subway represents a major city planning opportunity. It will bring new high-quality rapid transit to Vancouver's metro core along Central Broadway, making it much more convenient to get around both within the city and the wider region. By preparing the Broadway plan, we can capitalize on that investment and make the surrounding neighborhoods more complete, equitable, and sustainable, introduce new housing choices and job space, services and amenities, and integrating walking, biking, and bus connections with the subway. Broadway plan also aligns with and advances goals of several citywide policies, particularly in the areas of housing, jobs, and sustainability, including the Climate Emergency Action Plan, Housing Vancouver, Employment Lands and Economy Review, Transportation 2040, and of course the draft Vancouver Plan, Broadway Plan being developed in alignment with and really being a building block for the Vancouver Plan. Broadway Plan also enables us to meet our responsibilities to partners like TransLink and the province, and these are expressed in a supportive policies agreement between the city and TransLink, which obliges the city to create a plan around the subway with new higher density development, affordable housing, and job space. So I'll now introduce the overall vision for Broadway Plan, followed by the key land use directions. The vision for Broadway. In 2050, the Broadway Plan neighborhoods are highly walkable, vibrant, inclusive, and distinctive places to live, work, play, and learn, connected to the region by the Broadway subway. This is a bold plan that is essential to the city's efforts towards meeting the targets of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, particularly around sustainable mode share and walkable and complete neighborhoods. In terms of land use, this is a very, as I said, a very large, complex study area. So these are 4 general character areas that describe generally where and how the Broadway neighborhoods will grow and change over the next 30 years, recognizing that as a comprehensive area plan, the land use policy does get down to the block and parcel level, but this is kind of the overall directions across the study area. So firstly, in light blue are the centers, which are generally along Broadway and also extending along some of the other major arterials such as Kingsway and Cambie. These places also have a number of institutional campuses, including Vancouver Community College, the Great Northern Way campus, Vancouver General Hospital and BC Cancer Centre, and our own City Hall within the Civic District near Broadway and Cambie. Well connected by rapid transit, walking, and cycling, these higher density places in Vancouver's second downtown will integrate with the Broadway subway stations that provide new housing and job space and shops, services, and amenities to meet a range of community needs. So in terms of the plan's directions for the station areas, the key directions include building heights generally in the range of 30 to 40 stories for a variety of new housing options with a particular focus on market and below market rental and social housing, also with some strata ownership opportunities, as well as significant new job space such as major office and hotels, active commercial uses at street level such as shops, restaurants, and cafes, space for patios, looking at widening sidewalks along Broadway as a great street and strong integration with the subway stations with enhanced public realm and plaza spaces, And we're also looking at opportunities for amenity contributions from development in these areas, for example, new childcare or cultural amenities within podium spaces. Between the stations and away from Broadway are what we're characterizing as the shoulder areas. In terms of the land use policy, this is similar, but at a somewhat lower scale. So rather than 30 to 40 stories, more in the 20 to 30 story range. But again, depending on the location, looking at a range of new housing choices, new job space, and again, active ground floor commercial uses and a high quality public realm. Our second general character area are what we call the villages, shown in red there on the map. And these are really the cherished neighborhood high streets. And what we heard about early on in the planning process is really those central places within these neighborhoods that people really love and really feel are doing quite well today. And so we're looking to really kind of maintain that lower scale, that character of these places and foster these as places to shop, work and play during the day and at night, and creating a vibrant public life and really building on some of those recent successes you may be familiar with through COVID as part of pavemented plazas and expanded patios, etc. So in these places, recognizing that we are looking at quite significant growth and change throughout much of the study area, these 20 or so blocks, we are looking to maintain lower building heights, generally between 4 to 6 stories, to limit redevelopment pressures on those cherished existing businesses. There's also some strong concentrations of heritage, for example, in South Granville and around Main and Broadway to retain. But really, what we're looking to do here is, again, support the local businesses, foster those active ground floor commercial uses, high quality public realm, plazas, places to gather, etc. Moving along to our next general character area, our residential areas, and firstly, the existing apartment areas. So today, these places have about 25% of the city's purpose-built rental stock, providing a range of relatively affordable options, primarily in 3 to 4 story walk-up apartments, as well as some towers up to 12 stories around South Granville. Over the next 30 years, these places will maintain existing housing affordability and provide choice for existing renters to remain in their neighborhoods by enabling the careful renewal of the aging rental stock over the long term, with requirements for below market rent and strengthened tenant protections. So the careful renewal of the older rental stock has really been one of the overarching and most complex challenges for the Broadway Plan to address. Much of this stock comprises low-rise rental built in the 60s and 70s. And while today it provides some of the most affordable rental housing in the city, it is aging, and many of these buildings will reach the end of their life within the 30-year time frame of the plan. So owners of these buildings will face a choice of what to do. They can reinvest in their building, which is certainly encouraged for the majority, but recognizing some renovations may result in evictions. An owner could choose to disinvest and let the building deteriorate, and clearly this is not desirable and would have negative impacts for livability and tenant safety. Or the owner could choose to redevelop, and this could be positive or negative depending on the policies. The policy approach that Broadway is taking is to guide positive outcomes in a redevelopment scenario. The intent is not to incentivize redevelopment, but to provide a feasible pathway for renewal over the long term as rental buildings age and reach the end of their life in the next 30 years. The approach ensures existing tenants can remain in their neighborhoods, replaces and increases the number of rental homes, and retains existing affordability in perpetuity. The proposed building heights and densities in these areas in the rental redevelopment scenario have been carefully calibrated through extensive economic testing, built form analysis, and public and stakeholder input to achieve these objectives. So in these existing apartment areas, the plan directions include, with really the key direction here, enabling that long-term incremental renewal and expansion of the aging rental housing while maintaining existing affordability with the below market rental requirement in the new rental. So for redevelopment of rental, building heights up to 20 stories would be considered, with 20% of the new rental at below market rents. A key aspect of this approach as well, as I mentioned, is the enhanced tenant protections, including the right for tenants to return at rents comparable or lower than the previous rent. In these areas, there's also older strata housing, and the plan policies would enable renewal of aging strata with new strata ownership housing, and that would include an inclusionary social housing component in areas closer to rapid transit. The plan would also enable the renewal and expansion of aging social housing or non-market housing. There's about 60 of these sites across the plan area. So generally in these areas, tower heights would be between 12 to 20 stories, and we're also seeking to enable low-rise housing opportunities. As Andrew mentioned, these could include multiplex or lower scale options, for example, for a single lot. To help ensure that there's that incremental change over time, and to ensure that there's a mix of building types and scales over time, which is what we've heard that people would want to see in these areas, we are limiting new towers to a maximum of 2 per block. As well, to help enable more walkable and complete neighborhoods, we would enable new local serving shops and services in new development, particularly areas, for example, along greenways or where a greenway meets a park, areas where there would typically be higher pedestrian volumes, and really enabling small scale retail anywhere within these areas, but within a particular focus on those areas I just mentioned. The other type of residential area is what we call the low density areas, which are mostly zoned RT, and today include a mix of single family houses, duplexes, multiple conversion dwellings, and some smaller scale strata. There's also some concentrations of heritage houses and character houses in these places. The intent for the plan is that these areas will accommodate new rental apartments over time with strengthened tenant protections, enabling new affordable housing choices, particularly in off-arterial locations. So enabling rental apartments in these places on those quieter residential streets, again with new local serving shops and services, is one of the big moves for this plan. As we see here, building heights for new rental would generally be up to 6 stories for market rental, with heights up to 18 stories for projects with below market rental in strategic locations close to rapid transit and with the same enhanced tenant protections. Finally, our fourth general character area, the industrial employment areas, which comprise the Mount Pleasant industrial area, Broad Slopes mixed employment area near Granville Island, and a small area along Great Northern Way on the edge of the flats. Critical to the city's and regional economy, these places will provide additional opportunities for employment space to support a range of city-serving light industrial businesses and to foster a growing innovation economy and creative industries. So in terms of the key directions, as Andrew mentioned for the Vancouver Plan for the employment areas, restricting these areas for employment uses only, so not permitting residential needs areas, and looking to enable additional height density for mixed industrial and office developments to expand industrial capacity over time and intensify employment opportunities. Policy directions also seek to review and modernize and potentially expand permitted uses in these areas to support that evolving innovation economy and also to enable new services and amenities for employees in these areas. Fostering arts and cultural spaces, including with contributions from new development, is also a key direction for these places. So looking at growth and change overall, based on the draft plan policies, we estimate that these policies would enable development capacity over the next 30 years for up to 30,000 new homes, for 50,000 new residents, and up to 42,000 new jobs. Of the new homes, approximately 2/3 would be a mix of secured market rental, below market rental, or non-market housing, and about 1/3 would be ownership housing. Now, it's important to note that these are development capacity estimates and they're not growth projections, forecasts, or targets. Actual growth, of course, would depend on a number of factors outside the scope of the plan, including regional population and migration trends, desirability of living and working in the Broadway area, regional economic growth and other market trends, and allowances for growth in other parts of Vancouver or neighboring municipalities. So I'll now cover the key plan directions for some specific topics, starting with housing. And I've covered a number of these already through the land use policy. But really central to the plan's housing strategy was addressing this key question. How do we protect existing renters while encouraging investment and delivering new supply? So overall, for the plan, the key housing directions include focusing new housing opportunities in areas with relatively fewer renters, such as the centers and lower density residential areas. New and enhanced tenant protections focused on choice for existing renters impacted by redevelopment to stay in their neighborhoods. New rental housing affordable to low and moderate income households and supporting new non-market housing in all neighborhoods. And through this strategy, the Broadway Plan will help address current and future housing need identified in the city's recent 2022 Housing Needs Report. Moving along to the economy, one of the key objectives for the plan is to enable new and diverse job space close to rapid transit, which will strengthen this province's second largest job center along Central Broadway. As I mentioned, key directions here include protecting and intensifying the industrial and employment areas, enabling the supply of major office and hotel space to meet demand over the long term, supporting existing commercial areas and small businesses by focusing growth away from those village areas, and enabling new local serving shops and services in all residential areas, again, to help support more walkable and complete neighborhoods. In terms of transportation, in tandem with the proposed land use changes, central to Broadway meeting its climate emergency targets are the plan's transportation directions. These include improving the walking environment on all streets, but particularly on commercial streets and greenways, where we expect higher pedestrian volumes in the future, upgrading existing cycling routes to be safe and comfortable for all, improving the transit system, including the area's bus network and ensuring strong integration with the new subway stations, improving traffic safety on local streets by limiting or slowing movement, removing vehicle parking minimums for off-street parking in new developments, essentially adopting the current downtown parking standards and extending those to Broadway, and prioritizing curb space for those who need it most, such as people with mobility challenges or those making deliveries to businesses. So in terms of the public benefits strategy for the plan, this provides a long-term vision and direction for the delivery of public amenities and infrastructure to support growth and change in the area. The Public Benefits Strategy, or PBS, covers the full range of facilities delivered by the city, including parks and open spaces, community centers, affordable housing, childcare, social services, arts and culture, libraries, transportation, utilities, and fire and emergency services. This strategy builds on the existing provision within and around the plan area that you see illustrated on the map here. The PBS is a 10-year capital investment strategy. It includes over $1.1 billion of investments over the first 10 years of the plan. And these are funded by the three funding sources you see here in the table, including contributions by the city of about $127 million, developer contributions, so through CACs and development cost levies, of almost $800 million, and partnership contributions of about $182 million, focused on affordable housing and childcare. So this pie chart shows the general breakdown in funding between those different service areas. This breakdown and the associated amounts apportioned within it were developed through the planning process by first assessing the needs within the plan area, identifying strategies to meet those needs, and then prioritizing and balancing our investments in line with the approach taken to our city's capital strategic outlook process. So just wrapping up, wanted to share what we heard through our most recent round of engagement on the draft plan, which ran through March. As you can see here, we got strong feedback on our draft plan materials, over 3,600 survey responses, and overall across the plan area neighborhoods, about 2/3 support. So respondents indicating that they really like most aspects of the draft plan. So that gives us confidence that they're on the right track here as we finalize the plan and finish it off for council in May. So in terms of next steps, that's really our next major milestone that we're working towards. We're finalizing the plan document this week. I think it's almost 500 pages, so a ton of content in there, essentially 3 area plans combined. So council will be considering the plan starting on May 18th. We expect, given the significance and interest of the Broadway plan, There'll be lots of folks that want to come and speak, so we expect that this will unfold over multiple days at council, potentially into late May or early June. If council approves the plan, implementation phase would then commence, and we would start work on more detailed public realm planning in certain areas, pre-zoning or amending zoning in select areas to align with the plan's land use policy, updating design guidelines, making those amendments to the parking bylaw, etc. So we'll have a range of implementation actions flowing out of this work. On day one, the plan will function as enabling policy for rezoning applications. So rezonings could be considered in areas identified for rezoning and based on the plan's land use policy. And so this is really just a snapshot today of the draft plan. There's a ton of content in there that I haven't been able to cover, but I please encourage folks to visit our project webpage for more details. We still have all our draft plan engagement content online, updates, or to contact the team. And of course, stay tuned for that May 18th council date coming up. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, John. I like to see in the Q&A, there's actually some of you city folk are actually answering some of the questions as we go along. I see Catherine has answered at least one anyways. So I appreciate you guys doing that. That's great. That should weed out some of them. We can dismiss those questions. Thank you, John and Andrew. I guess you guys can direct where these questions will go. The first question I have for you is from Peter Kaliki. Hopefully I got that name right, Peter. With regard to traffic planning and people first streets and areas and reducing emissions, while bicycle lanes are appropriate in some areas and walkable neighborhoods make sense to reduce congestion, the elephant in the room is the resulting increased engineered traffic that is caused as a result. Is there a plan to make use of existing technologies, or is there a plan to address some of this created traffic from these initiatives?
I'm going to assume that was a sort of broad question around the citywide plan and not specifically Broadway, but
yeah, not
maybe what
Broadway, I think it's citywide. Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask Donnie as our engineer to respond to that one. I did see There was another question about flying taxis. I don't know if that's from the same person, but Donnie, do you want to take that question?
Well, if flying taxis exist, we'll be looking into it. But I think that the main directions in the Vancouver Plan as it relates to transportation is really about neighborhood completeness. In order to meet our climate goals, is really about having people co-located with their daily needs and services, whether it's their local bank, their and other kind of local amenities and shops and coffee shops, and getting those close to where people live. So we could either design them as part of new communities or look at existing communities to ensure that those spaces and those opportunities exist. So that reduces the number and length of trips, throughout the city. Of course, there's always going to be a need to get to your place of work, to access other regional amenities, and that's where the other modes come in, where that are higher capacity, like things like rapid transit, bus rapid transit, and other modes. So so the main directions within the Vancouver Plan around transportation are around neighborhood completeness. We will be updating the transportation plan to reflect the directions of the Vancouver Plan and reflect the long-term land use strategy as one of our implementation items.
Thank you, Donnie. Another question we have, anonymous attendee. Same question around the Arbutus corridor. Is there a plan for themed zones alongside new transit options? Is there any movement there? Can you describe the Arbutus corridor, what that's looking like? Does that question add up for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is, I think, foundationally similar to the one we answered earlier around area planning and the phasing work. But I don't know if I could put Donnie on the spot for one more question in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Arbutus corridor and kind of the transportation function as well as the green space is a huge amenity for that part of Vancouver. One of the directions is to locate people around strong valuable amenities such as the Arbutus corridor. Now we haven't explicitly called out kind of that corridor as a area for review specifically, but I think that it will be evaluated as part of through the implementation phase.
Maybe one thing I'll just quickly mention for the portion of the Arbutus Greenway that runs through the Broadway area, one thing that we put into the land use policies is where redevelopment occurs adjacent to portions of the corridor, we'd actually require kind of retail and cafes to wrap around and front onto the greenway itself. So, someone could grab a coffee or sit on a patio along the greenway. So just kind of enriching that experience along the greenway through some of these land use changes.
Great, thank you. Question, it's like somewhat of a political question I guess I have for you guys is that I know a lot of municipalities are getting a lot of flack for basically obstacles towards development and how long it takes to get things online redeveloped. So is there a review going on about how the city can streamline the process for redevelopments and getting housing back into the market faster?
Thanks, Taylor. And we do have actually one of our senior housing policy folks, Edna Cho, on the line. So Edna, maybe I could put this question to you.
Yeah, sure. There's actually multiple processes going on right now at the city, led out of the city manager's office to look at reviewing and ensuring that applications are more streamlined and occur quicker. We know just one example is there had been a major backlog in the permitting times for laneway housing during the pandemic. And there's been a lot of work done there to create a laneway only standalone processing approval stream. So that has gotten that back on track. In terms of work that we're doing in housing, in terms of the process for social and rental housing, where possible, we're trying to do pre-zoning in order to take away the rezoning step in areas where it makes sense. So we did that recently through the secured rental policy that was approved by council in December, where we took rezonings in C2s and put that directly into the existing zoning so that applications can go straight to DPs, as well as we've created some rental zones. Some of them are in low density areas. They're standard zones so that the rules are much more clear. So it's an enhanced rezoning process. So you don't have to negotiate and negotiate the setbacks for everything. Like it's all very, very clear. And then for social housing, we also did a similar thing in the RM3, RM4, where we currently 6-story social housing is allowed through rezoning. So we took that and put that directly into the zoning as well to take away that rezoning step. And we do have another zoning report going shortly in the downtown east side to do similar things.
Thank you, Edna. Sorry, I'm just pulling up one I was trying to find. Is there any transit plans like local bus, rapid transit, et cetera, along Southeast Marine Drive in the River District area as it's developing rapidly, and obviously a lot of housing lots and residents are moving in? So,
yep, I'll put this one back to Donnie, but just to let you know that as I mentioned early in the presentation, we have been trying to make sure that our work with the Vancouver Plan aligns closely with Transport 2050. So if folks haven't seen that, that is TransLink's long-term strategy for transit planning in the region. Transport 2050 just came out earlier this year as well, and well worth taking a look at. Southwest Marine, Donnie?
Sure, and thanks, Andrew. The Marine Drive as a corridor has been identified by TransLink as part of the major transit network. So they'd be looking at increasing transit capacity along that corridor. That's within the life of the plan, which is out to 2050. So I'm not certain of the timing. It's something that needs to be discussed regionally. But yes, it has been identified as a high priority corridor.
okay, thank you. For strata developments, Reza is asking if the 20% must be social and for rental development, or 20% must be below market rental plus accommodating existing tenants. Can you explain the breakdown of what that looks like going forward?
Sure, and this is another good question for Edna.
Sure, I can start this one, and maybe John, you might want to add as well. So in the plan, there are different policies for strata, for below market rental, and for social housing. So there are some areas that will just allow straight strata developments, and then in the residential, existing residential neighborhoods and villages, there are policies that are asking for social housing. It's our inclusionary, our standard inclusionary social housing policy. So it's 80% strata, 20% turnkey floor space to the city. Turnkey dedicated to the city, and then the below market rental, where that's allowed through the plan, primarily in the existing residential areas and in the strategic locations in the RT zones. It is 100% market rental with 20% of the units, of the floor space secured at below market rents, and that would be, it's a 20% below CMHC average rents, or 40% off new market rents based on the CMHC report.
That's great, thank you. I have a question here. It's a little bit loaded. I told you those might come, like in a rehearsal. That's from Peter Kaliki again. As the PBS goal is to be 72% funded by CACs and developers are not charities, of course, how does this funding model make sense to help address housing affordability as the costs are ultimately passed on to the consumer, meaning new buyers of a property, basically, and not the developers? Is there an answer for that? Or can we? It's a little bit loaded, but I'll work with it.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is a Broadway question in particular. John, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. So a little bit loaded there, but yeah. So that that portion
question though
of the funding for the public benefit strategy, certainly that does rely on development cost levies as well as CAC contributions from new development. A significant portion of that is actually the inclusionary social housing that Edna just mentioned. So the value of that inclusionary social housing is essentially the CAC in those projects. We are also enabling 100% strata projects in some areas, as Edna said, and so the expectation there is that there would be a cash CAC contribution or other in-kind amenities such as a childcare or cultural amenity as part of that rezoning. And so those would be going through the negotiated CAC process. So the different housing tenures have different roles to play, but certainly the expectation is that strata residential projects would be contributing towards the public benefit strategy, as has been the case in other area plans and across the city for many years.
Okay. I have several more questions on transportation. I'm going to kind of lump them in. I ask you one blanket question. Anything that you didn't cover in your presentation regarding some sort of mainline transportation routes that you haven't identified in your presentation, like 49th was one that we've seen come up here. 41st, I think we talked about that a little bit. Anything else that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I saw, Taylor, that the questions around 49th and 41st came up a few times, and we've already talked about our Arbutus there, but certainly that 41st, 49th corridor has been called out in our work because it was identified through our discussions with TransLink and through their Transport 2050. I guess maybe Donnie, I think we were pretty comprehensive, but if there's anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, the other thing I want to call out is the proposed Greenway network in the transportation chapter, which we don't have, which you can see in the draft plan. It's a network of car-free or car-light streets throughout Vancouver that would also add to kind of transportation options, for residents and such.
Okay, thank you very much. Question from Derek. in aid of distributed growth, what is the position or policy position of the city towards infill density in residential multiplex area neighborhoods, specifically through fee simple row housing that would allow more people to equitably live in one neighborhood? I think you guys did touch on that in your presentation, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a great question, and maybe I'll turn this over to Edna, but just to let you know, there is some concurrent work that the city is doing around that multiplex question right now. That's certainly been something that has received some good coverage lately. There was a council motion recently, which we have been working on, and which there's information on online at vancouver.ca I think it's multiplex, but we can share the link later. But beyond that, row houses and maybe other missing middle, Edna, do you want to talk about that in terms of our approach?
Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities, I think, through the Vancouver Plan in lots of areas in the city to consider row houses, townhouses. In the pink areas on the map, those would, in addition to higher density forms such as 4 to 6 story apartments and 12-story apartments, the townhouses and row houses would also be considered in those areas. Yeah, so right now in the multiplexes, I think the focus is really on the plexes up to 6 units kind of thing. That's what we've been directed to explore in those areas.
Okay, I'm going to try and interpret this next question from Justin. What is the anticipated minimum frontage required for a single detached residential lot in order to build 6-unit residential buildings? And what is the anticipated FSR? I believe this is in regards to Mayor Kennedy has been touting this a fair amount. So maybe someone's an expert on that. We can talk about that process.
Yeah, this might be another Edna question, just to say that we're actually looking at some of those technical issues right now as part of the work. So I don't know that anything has been finalized quite yet, but there have been some early efforts to explore that. We did, in fact, through our engagement process, ask some technical questions around the multiplex design as well. So that's all being fed into the hopper there, and we're hoping to have some more details shortly. Edna, do you want to respond in more detail?
I think kind of you've covered it. Like, the work is underway right now. The team is looking kind of extensively at different options that could be considered for multiplexes. One of the principles that they are looking at is what can happen on a standalone site without having to consolidate. So they are looking at all the different dimensions, but nothing has been concluded yet. They're just sort of in the beginning phases of that work.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, we had a session about the leasehold land in False Creek, and we have a question here about that. Is there any more discussion held by Vancouver and False Creek as to what will happen in 2036?
I wonder, perhaps Karis, if you want to take this call, or I could still open for my colleagues if there are others that want to jump in. John, I don't know if this is for you as well, but got a few folks that could probably provide various aspects of the answer. Maybe Karis.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andrew. To my understanding, there was a council direction to come back with a planning terms of reference, and that's being worked on right now. But at present, we're just waiting for that terms of reference for the planning work in False Creek South to come forward.
It might be worth just building on that a little bit to say that, there have been a few council motions just reflecting back the sort of broader aspirations of the plan with those implementation pieces. And there are, as a consequence of council motions, a few areas that have been called out already for next steps. False Creek South was identified through the council motion for community plan. We also have the Rupert Renfrew stationary work that's underway as well. If folks haven't heard about that, please do look into it. We're doing a new station area plan there. Just the other evening, further discussion around the waterfront hub. And so just as a way of sort of reassuring folks in terms of the next steps of the plan, there are other pieces that are actually concurrently being investigated now as part of the planning department's efforts to focus on some key areas.
Great. I'll just want to point the members to the question and answer the city staff here is doing such a great job at answering these questions online in text that I'm like having trouble keeping up with them. There's so many of you doing it, but there's great answers there and answering all the questions. So I'm going to try and grab the ones that I don't see anybody typing an answer to. We have a thank you from Val in regards to take this one on. I haven't read it yet, so I'll just read it out loud. In regards to building permits and the current difficulties getting permits, how likely is it that the provincial government will step in and take the power? This is a bit out of your realm, so we'll skip that one actually. With respect to encouraging complete neighborhoods, will there be any incentives for property owners to provide affordable / retail office space? I think we did touch on that in your presentation.
It's a really interesting question, actually. I mean, and I guess it requires us to dig into what may be meant by incentives. But I think one of the things to note just generally when we think about complete neighborhoods is it is, as we mentioned, a very sort of cornerstone piece of the Vancouver Plan to ensure that we have our neighborhoods doing more. You know, the sort of history of planning over the 20th century in Vancouver and elsewhere has really been about separating uses, making sure that we've got residential over here and the shops over here, and you know, a somewhat separated modernist way of thinking about things. And the plan really seeks to turn a corner on that and introduce opportunities for neighborhoods that are, broadly speaking, about more mixed use, more mixture activities, you know, greater proximity to the daily and weekly needs. How exactly that lands on the ground is going to look different depending on the different types of neighborhoods that we're talking about. And so I mentioned in my presentation, you know, the idea of a complete neighborhood will mean one thing potentially in a transit area. It'll mean another thing in a low density residential area. And how exactly that lands on the ground, I mean, you can see some early directions in the plan there. John also mentioned in his work on the Broadway Plan, this idea of how they can encourage you know, greater mixed uses in different parts of their neighborhoods. But you know, suffice to say, we're looking at different ways to make those neighborhoods complete, and the sort of ways that completeness can be activated, whether or not it's through an approach that may involve some measure of trade-off with development entitlements or other sorts of mechanisms there. I think those are all sorts of things that can be explored through the work that we're doing. Anything that you'd like to add, John, or others?
Yeah, maybe I'll just quickly add. So for Broadway Plan in the residential areas, our policy, we do have consideration for a little bit more density for apartments that are providing, say, a corner retail space, because typically those projects would have certain setbacks in that to have that kind of green and leafy character, but where there would be commercial space, it would come out to the sidewalk. And so that would provide a bit of a density bump for those projects. So that might be a little bit of an incentive. And I think for us, you know, it's going to be a bit of an experiment, and we're going to be monitoring this. And something that I didn't mention for Broadway as part of that agreement with TransLink is we have this kind of 5-year review cycle. So we can make adjustments to the plan kind of, you know, periodically as we see how things play out on the ground.
Thanks, John. And I'll just mention there are other concurrent processes that we've also kickstarted in the last couple of years. Council a couple of years ago had some interest in corner stores. So that's another element that's been included. I might actually just to fill this out, because we haven't had a chance to hear from some of our economy folks, but Suzanne or Matt, I wonder if you want to jump in and add anything on some of the other sort of considerations coming out of the employment lands work that you've been doing.
Sure. Yeah, I think the only thing I'd like to mention is that we did engage in a pretty rigorous research and engagement process as part of the Vancouver Plan. It's the Employment Lands and Economy Review. And we have a full project website with all sorts of data and statistics if people are interested in that kind of thing. And one of the biggest things we did as part of that was a series of projections with an external consultant to help us figure out how much space we might need to support jobs and economy over, you know, out to 2050. And so that work really identified the need to grow our retail commercial space in particular as the population of the city grows. We know that there will be, pressure on those spaces if we don't increase supply. So that's a big part of what the Vancouver Plan is all about, is about looking for opportunities to increase access to services, in retail commercial spaces, as well as major office and industrial.
Great. Didn't want to interrupt there in case someone else was going to jump in. Anyone else on the economist front? Okay. Sounds good. We were at 11:24. Let's call 11:25. We've got 5 minutes left. I want to end this on time for all of you and everyone's sake. So we want to thank all of you for being here. This was actually an amazing session. I've been in a lot of municipal sessions before, not in Vancouver so much, but and this was, you guys just really tackled this. So I really appreciate you coming out. Understand you guys, you don't have to do this, and you really came to bat here. This is awesome. So I had some challenging questions for you too. So thank you very much. We'll have you guys out of here. I have a couple announcements to make for the membership. We don't have to have you stay if you don't wish to, and we'll finish up by 11:30. So we'd also love to hear feedback from today's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was just going to say that on behalf of my colleagues, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciated this opportunity, and a shout out to Cheryl for organizing this with such finesse. Really great to be able to be here today. So thank you all.
Took the words out of my mouth. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks a lot.
We'd also like to hear your feedback from today's session. So when you log off, you'll get a pop-up link. This is to members, of course, during the event survey. And please send us your thoughts by completing the survey. We can make better events for you when we know what you're liking. I'd also like to mention some upcoming events. On May 12th, we have a Let's Talk Land Assembly Part 2 event. On May 27th, we have a property development event, What Realtors Need to Know. And on June 2nd, we have our SFU Gondola and TransLink update event. So that you'll get some more update on TransLink and what they're doing in corridors and things like that across different municipalities. So go to the courses and events calendar to register today for any of these events. So thank you, everyone. We're 4 minutes early, and thanks again to the city staff and Andrew and John in particular, and Cheryl for organizing all of this. Fantastic. Cheers.